Good evening and welcome to the X-Files here in the heart of Salt Lake City, where courageous people share their journey from the religion of Mormonism to a personal saving relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm your host, Bishop Earl. We have a wonderful guest tonight, and we'd like to begin with a word of prayer before I introduce her. Lord, we ask for your Spirit to be with us tonight, that the things that are said will be pleasing unto you, and we're grateful for this opportunity. Pray your Spirit to be with us. Help us say things that will touch hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amy Limburg, we're happy to have you with us tonight.
Oh, thank you.
We visited with Doug a few weeks ago, and he did a wonderful job and was able to share his story. And so we'll get into how he impacts on your life in a minute. But tell us a little bit about your history.
I was brought up Methodist. And my parents were very active in the Methodist Church, and baptized as a baby and confirmed when I was in 8th grade. That was the sequence that was followed. And
confirmed at 8th grade. Okay.
And then you become a full member of the church. And at that time, I just recall that there wasn't much going on for youth, the older youth.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of started falling away. My parents kind of were disillusioned a little bit with some changes that were going on. So
in the Methodist
in the
Church.
Methodist Church, and so as they started pulling away, then as I graduated from high school, I don't remember much from high school of going to church that much, and then went into college and just kind of entered that whole culture of
lifestyle
and questioning everything. You just learn how to question, and especially questioning, is there really a God?
Oh, really? Was there a God? Was that one of the things on your mind at that point? And how was your relationship with Jesus at this point, say?
Well, it's interesting because I think back that when I was a freshman in college, there was a group of students who came around to the dorms and asked us to, what did we base our lives on? Who was at the center of our life?
Yeah.
And I think at an early age, I had learned how to tell people what I thought they wanted to hear.
Oh.
And so I told them, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Because I knew they were there representing
Him.
organized religion of some sort. And
were your parents then, they were teaching you about Jesus and grace and the things that the Methodists teach? Or trying to, at least?
Not at that time so much. I think because they were disillusioned. They had helped form this little satellite church.
Oh.
And there had been changes in pastor assignments and things like that, and a lot of the people had actually left it.
Oh.
And so they were trying to stick it out because they felt they should.
Yeah.
And it just kind of disillusioned us. My mother would come home from church, and I think at that young age I was thinking to myself, well, if this is so great, how come when we come home she's always crying and she's not happy, and that kind of thing.
So you ran into the kind of a period of inactivity from everything, I guess, for a while. And what happened after that?
Well, then, finished school and got married and moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Lived there for 25 years and just enjoying life and not practicing any,
no religion, really, at
formal
all.
Religion at all.
Had you heard of? Oh, go ahead.
Just considered myself agnostic.
Yeah.
At that time, I defined it as knowing that there is some being, but is it really a God? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So you're just kind of out there floundering, or whatever you might say, religiously at least. And had you ever heard of the Mormon Church at this point?
The only thing I'd ever heard was, just when I was a kid, my father had said there was something on the TV, and he just said, well, I'd never move to Utah with those bigamists.
Oh.
And so that was the only thing I'd ever heard, about.
With the polygamists and all that stuff.
Polygamists, yeah.
Okay, well, so now you're married, and do you have children with this first husband? And,
No children.
Okay, and then but you eventually divorced.
No, he passed away.
Oh, he passed away. I'm sorry.
He passed away, and then Doug and I met, and we knew each other before that, and so we got married, and then we decided we wanted to have children together because He didn't have any in his first marriage, and I didn't in mine. And so we were both finally ready.
Yeah.
And we had a daughter, and it took us about 5 years, to get pregnant and stay pregnant and all of that. And
you were a little older parents then, right?
Yeah. I was in my early 40s, and Doug was already in his late 40s.
Wow.
And so, it took a little effort. And just started right away thinking that I wanted organized religion in my life to help develop those values and goals.
Oh, really?
The morals.
Yeah.
I thought I'm a teacher in the public schools, and that's what I did in Albuquerque, and just saw so many kids that were lost, and others that seemed to be well-rounded, and those are the ones that had some sort of church experience.
Some church, and so you wanted to raise your daughter with that kind of
wanted to raise her with that
values. And now Doug was LDS.
Doug was inactive in whatever he was doing too, because when we got married, there was no question of whether, religion wasn't a question. We were both practicing our own kind of thing.
All right. But then after a few years, you eventually, or he actually became a little more active, or he was LDS Church at least became one of your options, I guess.
Well, as we started looking, and we started to have discussions about it, and I wanted to shop for a church.
Okay.
And because of all the difficulties with getting pregnant and staying pregnant and that sort of thing, I never got around to shopping.
Oh, okay.
And so had some real close calls, and Doug at the time had prayed and said that he wanted to bring up his daughter in righteousness. And I'd been praying, and knew, was coming around to the fact that there is a God, and I was coming around to that whole thing that I was turning to God for things. And so let's see.
No, did your Methodist religion or background start coming again back to you when you say you were turning more toward God and trying to get values, or? I
really, I'd gone through the period, I think, growing up in the 60s and 70s, where it was like, well, we can teach values without having church.
Religion and church.
And then, I just did the complete 180 and said, well, no, I think I do need help teaching values, because I've seen kids who, just are really messed up.
Yeah. So you shared all this with Doug, and then what was the decision, or what did you decide?
Then basically we were still going to shop until after delivery. I had congestive heart failure, so and our daughter was a little bit premature, and so he was praying a lot, and he was ready to move, and I wasn't ready to move anywhere other than taking care of myself and the baby and that sort of thing. And so he got us going to the Mormon church, and started looking at it. I think too is because I was going through those experiences while I was in the hospital, they sent this cute young couple that came up and brought us a present, and they gave me a blessing, and
Latter-day Saints.
Latter-day Saints, yeah. And my mother-in-law was instrumental in that, because she had asked my husband, "Is it okay if we send someone to give her a blessing?" and things like that. And I'd been in the family for 5 years now, and just really loved the people and the family, and was just amazed that long distance, they held a shower and videotaped it and sent presents, and I was just in awe of some of the
some of the things they were
the
doing.
Niceties.
And so you eventually take the missionary lessons, right? How did that go?
Because Doug said, the easiest way to learn is let the missionaries come and talk to you and teach you. Because I obviously wasn't getting out and doing the studying on my own. And so that's what we did, and just started bringing them. I think for me, the biggest transition was I've come to, when they say pray about it if it's true.
Right.
I did pray a lot, and I realized that Jesus Christ was true. And that I did believe in Jesus Christ. I believed in him being more than just a man, that was able to do great miracles or any,
even when the missionaries were teaching you?
Even when the missionaries were teaching me. And so then I started thinking, well, maybe I can develop a testimony of Joseph Smith too. But they would ask me questions like, what do you think of the Trinity? And, I would just say, well, it's 3 in 1. Oh, we think the same thing.
Okay.
But it really wasn't defined beyond that. So anytime they would ask me a question that was Christian related, I didn't realize the definitions were different.
Yeah, the words are the same, but definitions
The
are
words are
different.
the same, and I was told that the Mormon Church was a Christian church.
You were.
And that the Book of Mormon is just another testament to the Bible.
Yeah.
And they made it sound like it's just the third book of the Bible.
Yeah. Did they start having you read the Book of Mormon, and did you read it?
I did not read it before I became a member. No.
You read in it, I imagine.
Right.
You kind of knew the gist of the story. And did you ever pray about it or pray about Joseph Smith then?
But that was when I got more of a testimony for
Jesus.
For Jesus, yeah.
Okay.
And just figured the other would come.
Yeah. Now, so you get baptized. Your daughter's born. Now you get baptized, and
another big influence there was I had to go back to work after 3 months, and I needed someone to care for my daughter. And neither one of us had family there.
Okay.
And so we had started attending the Mormon church.
Right.
And Doug said, well, why don't you call Relief Society? Because I'd been interviewing people just through ads in the paper. Yeah. And there was always something that I did not like, and says, I'm never going to find someone I'll be happy with taking care of my baby. And he said, well, just call Relief Society. And I had no concept of what that was.
Right.
So, after, bad interview, I broke down and said, okay, I'll call this Relief Society. And it turned out to be the most wonderful woman in the world.
That would come and take care of your daughter.
Yeah. I mean, she was just amazing. And to this day is, amazing.
Still a
She's
good
my
friend.
daughter's, second mother.
Oh, that's
And, just wonderful people that really reached out to help us.
Yeah.
And as we... I think, too, is just all the fellowshipping that took place. I had a newborn as we entered this new church, so that brought a lot of attention.
Right.
Because the Mormon people love babies.
Yeah.
And, so they were on the same plane that I was on at that time,
So
mentally.
you're very active then, and then a year passes, and then what happens?
A year passes, and then my husband's like, okay, you're ready now for your endowments. And I was very, very nervous about that because I didn't understand it at all. I had no concept, even though I'd read the Pearl of Great Price and the Doctrine and Covenants by now, because I'm trying to figure out, what this is all about. I was real nervous, but there was always another couple who'd just gone through, and they came and
they came through it, okay.
and they came through it, and really impressed upon me that it's okay, you'll learn it as you go, that kind of thing. And so, and of course, my daughter's caregiver was the one who was my partner to help me through it and that sort of thing. So I had a lot of encouragement and positive feedback when I would say I was nervous about it and I didn't think I was ready, and they go, oh, you're ready.
Yeah. So how was it going through the temple? Which temple did you go through?
We went, at that time, Albuquerque didn't have a temple, so we went to the Mesa temple.
And how was that experience?
And that experience was, by then, you've taken a trip, you're there, you're committed.
It better be good.
I'm asking questions. To me, it was just learning because everything was new and different.
Yeah.
You're now in the temple, and up to this point, you weren't allowed in the temple.
Yeah.
And
now you could go. And
now I could go, and so you just feel like you've already committed.
Yeah.
Before you go. So probably the most shocking thing during that temple thing was that finding out that we were going to be gods and goddesses.
You hadn't heard that one before?
I had not heard that before. Right. And all I could think of through the whole rest of the temple ceremony was that I don't want to be a god or a goddess.
When is that going to happen?
Yeah. And I think, maybe subconsciously too, it was bringing back my upbringing as a Methodist that, there's only one God. Well, if we're going to be gods and goddesses, then there's more than one God.
Yeah.
And to this point, the Mormon faith was telling me there's only one God.
You'd believed that they were monotheistic.
That they were
or
monotheistic,
and yet they, or Christian, as it were, and now
they're
you
sitting
find out
there.
there's lots of gods or potential for gods. Wow. So how long did you persist in? I mean, you were active now in the church for a while.
So then it was still just keep going. Follow the path. You set the course.
Yeah.
And so then it was like 6 months after that, because it was. One of the goals was for my husband to be able to bless our baby.
Okay.
And so well, I guess he had blessed her the year before, but it was to be sealed.
Oh, okay.
So then it was like another 6 months before we were able to all be sealed together.
Oh, okay. That was special
And
experience.
so that
I'm
was a
sure.
special experience, and that we did in the Bountiful Temple.
Oh, okay. Now, did you, again, we're kind of getting back to testimony, but did you ever develop this testimony you were saying of Joseph Smith?
You know, I really tried. There were times when, I was asked for a Relief Society lesson to share, how I got my testimony of Joseph Smith.
Because everybody knew you were a convert, of course.
Yeah,
probably,
so, they were real interested. And I just remembered being at a sealing of one of our nieces.
Yeah.
And knowing that it just had a good feeling.
Yeah.
But, the whole room was great. The words that were said were wonderful. And just thinking to myself that, well, if I can believe in Jesus, and I really enjoy this, sealing
These good
ceremony
feelings.
and these good feelings, and what's so hard about believing that Joseph Smith was a prophet?
Yeah.
And so I really tried to convince myself that was my kind of my conversion.
You feel like you're really having to work at it, though, it sounds like.
Yeah, I felt like I had to really work at it.
And how did you feel about the Bible at this point? Was that...
I still loved the Bible. However, I completely was, more focused. The focus shifted away from the Bible when I became Mormon. It wasn't... that's really what I was searching for to begin with.
Yeah,
but because of this
relationship with Jesus and the Bible, and you've kind of moved away from that a little bit, you're thinking?
And just the wonderful relationship, the family values, that was what I was really looking for, too, at that time. And that part was, all those needs were being met.
Wow. And how long did this last then?
Lasted about 13 years.
Wow. Raising the daughter, and your husband's active, and you're active, and you're primary president, I understand, and lots of other callings, I guess. And
We were very active, temple goers, kept trying to go to the temple as often as we could to try and understand it, because people would just keep saying, well, you need to go more often.
Did it get any better for you?
And
Somewhat.
not really, somewhat.
Maybe,
It's like you learn it a little bit more so that you're more familiar with it. But as far as feeling like it was helping me develop a testimony, no.
Yeah. So what kind of happens to bring you and or your husband out of the church?
Mostly it was my husband started. He had struggled a lot with it when he was a child, and then had left it, and then he'd come back, and he was at that point again where he was struggling with it again.
Just any specific questions? Or?
Well, I think again it was, I remember I had been released from my primary calling, and we actually got to go to Sunday school. So, I was thinking part of it was they kept me so busy that I never was in a Sunday school class when they were ever studying the New Testament or the Old Testament.
Really?
So finally I was in one of these classes, and my husband would ask questions that were very legitimate, and people would just really sidestep it, or one of the older priesthood members would give their opinion, and then it was a closed conversation.
That was it, huh?
Yeah, there really wasn't discussion back and forth, and I think that was part of it too, is when I realized that we're not really studying the New Testament, we're studying the Book of Mormon, and then it refers to scriptures in the New Testament that will support the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And so I think that started, a lot of the, my husband at this time had already been questioning.
Yeah.
And they had invited him to be the Sunday school teacher because he always had all these wonderful questions. And so, he's, when they gave him that, offered him that calling, he just said, well, I just can't do that,
Really?
Well, because he had, that was when he was done.
Serious questions. Huh?
Yeah, he had such serious questions and hadn't been finding the answers that he wanted.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of his turning points. And
well, how did you feel about him questioning? Was that uncomfortable for you, since you were trying to get this testimony going of the church?
Not really. By this time, I think I'm just exhausted.
Really?
They keep you so busy.
Yeah.
And I just, I was kind of, it had been good for us in terms of family values and associations with people and that sort of thing, and the social life.
Yeah.
And my biggest concern was probably my daughter. It was like just coming up to that realization that oh my gosh, okay, we've made this change. We moved here to raise her in a Mormon culture, and now we're leaving it because we don't believe in it.
Oh dear.
And it's like a complete flip.
Yeah.
And so then I started questioning. I always thought I kind of knew what I was doing, but then you start questioning, like, do I really know?
Yeah.
You
Well, did you have a specific experience that was kind of tipped you over the edge, so to speak, or was it more of a process?
For me, it's more of a process. I remember the last day that I went was just because, again, it was another one of those experiences in Relief Society where it wasn't really a discussion.
It was all just one side of it?
It's one-sided,
Okay.
yeah. It's like they keep asking you to participate, but
They really don't want to.
only if you're in agreement with
Yeah.
what they're talking about.
Yeah, it is interesting. There just isn't a lot of, not a lot of think for yourself stuff. You know, you're okay as long as you kind of follow the pattern and follow the prescription. And you mentioned that you had talked to a bishop about the word atonement, or about the atonement. Tell us
Well,
that
when
a
we
little
first
bit.
started investigating Mormonism, that was, or when we had thought about, and I'd thought about going shopping. That was one of the primary questions in my mind was, well, why did Jesus have to die for us? I don't understand that.
And you asked the bishop this?
And I asked the bishop that, and his response was, no one understands it.
Oh.
It's something we study for life, and it'll be explained, on the other side. But even I, as bishop, don't understand it. And
Oh my goodness.
and you'll, just you learn it a little at a time, and God will reveal what He wants to you.
Do you think he was kind of avoiding the question, or maybe he didn't understand it really?
Thinking back, I think he probably really didn't
understand
understand it. Yeah.
Well, I think the Mormons do have a different concept of that atonement than a Christian does. So tell us now, you've come out, or you and your husband are questioning seriously, and are you interviewed, or someone comes and talks to you, or anything? What happened?
No, we're both avid readers, and my husband had been, doing a lot of research, and so he would share with me different books or articles constantly.
Yeah.
And one of the big turning points was Sean McCraney's show,
Heart of the Matter.
Heart of the Matter, and he started showing me that, and I mean, it's just laid out so logically.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just seemed to be we both started being able to understand.
Yeah.
Whereas before I kind of felt like I was in a fog when I kept trying to understand Mormonism and how it really worked, and all these little rituals and talk of pre-existence and those sort of things. It just didn't really fit or feel comfortable, but yet I didn't question it at the level I should have been as far as really studying doctrine.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're saying too is that you only hear one side of it, and I think that one thing I appreciated about Heart of the Matter was that the topics are at least the facts are out there, and then you can decide for yourself and go research, and it's well documented usually, and then you can find out what's being said and if it's supportable or not. So that kind of kept moving you out, and eventually you just decided, okay, we're through.
Yeah, we started attending Bible study with Sean McCraney,
Okay.
and just really, I think, was the joy that came to both of us in that we're finally in the Bible.
Yeah, explain that difference a little bit.
We wanted to do to begin with, and we just kind of got sidetracked for
a bunch
13
of years.
years. Yeah.
How is that different? I mean, explain that in the book or in the church too with the Bible. I guess we touched on it, but
right. Some of the the stories, the simple versions of stories, are shared sometimes.
Yeah.
And names are used. The names of the Bible are all used, but they're not always mean the same thing.
Yeah, and not in context usually,
and not
right?
in context.
Yeah.
And we were always encouraged to read the Book of Mormon, and we lived with my mother-in-law, and she was a great influence that way.
Wow.
And so having a young daughter, it was a great role model. Okay, let's sit down and read the Book of Mormon, and we went through that twice, I think.
Yeah.
And so we were always wrapped up in that rather than in the Bible.
Right. How did you feel about Jesus now as a Christian?
As a Christian, it's just overwhelming, the joy and the love You know, I think
the grace that He's offered us, the free gift, and
the just finally the you know the understanding of why He did die for us.
and that He was God. He didn't have to come, and that He did that for us because He loves us.
Because we're sinners.
Yeah, and we can't do it ourselves.
You know, I think a lot of us in any of our cultures, we always try to be perfect or try to be the best we can. And, you know, at least I did. I learned at a young age just to pretend everything's always great and fine, and you know.
So you're having a joyous relationship with Jesus now.
Joyous with Jesus.
Amy,
yes.
it's wonderful that you'd come and share your story with us. It's interesting. We haven't had many converts, being totally convert as an adult into the church, and then go through the temple and be active as you were, and now you feel a relationship that you never had before, right? With Jesus.
Well, and as I thought back to troubled times, I would turn to God, and He did answer my prayers. You know, I can think of instances.
And you probably went through that just because that's what He needed you to do. So, anyway, Amy, we're grateful that you shared your story with us, and we'll see you next week.